Hi all, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to talk about implementation and API in Android Gradle. So whenever you're working on Android project, you must have come across the implementation and API in the Gradle file, right? So because everyone is very familiar with the implementation part and very less are familiar with the API, and this topic is more about where and how we can use the API configuration in our Gradle file. So let's check the definition first. So implementation is just like a normal adding a dependency into your project, and this will make sure that your dependency is not exposed to the other modules in your project. That means the dependency is available to other modules only at the runtime. And if we talk about the API, if we have included any dependency as an API, that means that dependency is exposed to the other modules in your project. That means the dependency is available at runtime and at the compile time to the other modules, right? So now if we compare the both implementation and API, let's see how they are different. The implementation, it is very internal to your module, and if you talk about the API, then it is exposed to the other modules. And the implementation, it is internal to your module. That means it is not visible to the other modules. The classes and the variables and the functionality, you cannot access them. And if we talk about the API, then as it is exposed, the classes and the other methods are visible to the other module. If we talk about the implementation, then it will hide your implementation and it will perform an abstraction on your dependency by not exposing the methods and classes to the other modules. Whereas in API, as it is exposed, and there won't be any abstraction and encapsulation of your dependency. Now we will see how exactly we can use it into our project, and mainly the API is mostly used whenever you're working on a multi-modular application or when you're creating a library for your projects. I'm taking an example of my previous project which I have explained you about how we can create a library module, and you can find the link in the description. And if you remember, we used the retrofit. We created a network module where we were using the retrofit instance and we were printing the base URL of the retrofit. And if you can see, this network module is getting used into our main module over here. Now we will go to our network module, and here you can see we have the retrofit instance and everything. Now I'll show you. Now let's take an example. You have the retrofit client and everything. So retrofit client, not here. Retrofit client dot retrofit dot base URL dot URL. So what I'm gonna do here is, as right now we are printing the base URL directly in the retrofit client, but now what we'll do is I'll just comment this code and I'll just log dot the main activity, and I'm just printing the URL. Now if I'll build my project, it will give me error. Now let's see if we get any error or not. That's it. So gave us error, cannot access retrofit to retrofit. Check your module class path for missing and conflicting dependency. Now what does it mean? It means, as I told you, the implementation will only provide the dependencies at the runtime. It will not give you at the compile time. So at the compile time only the project got failed because we are trying to access the retrofit instance, and as we know, the implementation will not expose the retrofit or the dependency to the other modules. So due to that, we are getting this error, and how we can resolve it? API will help us to expose the dependency to the other modules at the compile time and at the runtime. Now what we can do is, we'll just come over here and we'll just make it as an API, and let's sync our project. Okay, so the project is synced, and you don't see any change over here because make changes at the Gradle level. Now we'll just rebuild our project again, and we'll see whether we still get the error or not. And we can see the rebuild project is success without any error as we were getting earlier. As you can see, this is the one example where you can use the API where you want to expose the classes out of your module. Now the next thing is, if we can see, there are other dependencies as well, like retrofit converter, OKHTTP. Now let's try to access the JSON, and you can see there is no auto suggestion over here to provide us the JSON classes and methods because we have added this dependency through the implementation. Now if we change it to the API, then if you think our project, then after doing this, we'll be able to access our JSON. Now if I'll type it, and you can see we get the classes which are included in the network module dependency. So basically, this is a very basic, and this is how you can use the API to your project whenever you're working on the multi-modular or heavy project. Now, there are few pros and cons of using the API, which we'll be talking about. Now, when we talk about the pros of using the API, because by default, we use the implementation for including any dependency. But when we use the API, then we have to be careful where to use and where not to use. So first we'll go through the pros of using API. The first thing is modularization. As I told you, like this is very helpful when you are working on a multi-modular application. And now the second thing is consistent API. The same thing which I told you, like when it is easy to manage your API version at one place, which will help you to overcome the compatibility issues which we mostly face in our Android development. Because you are specifying the retrofit version at one place and the same version is getting used at the different places wherever you have exposed that retrofit dependency. Then the next is the reusability. The same thing, because you have exposed the API, the same thing, same dependency functions classes can be reused at the by the other modules. Now we'll check the cons of using API. The first one is the increased coupling. If I'll use the retrofit dot builder. So right now I'm just using the retrofit in class and retrofit dot builder dot just like that. Okay, so right now it is not giving us any error. Why? Because we have used the API. Now if we'll change it back to the implementation, then it will start giving us the error because we have removed the exposure of our dependency. Now if we come over here, you started getting the error. So the same thing, increased coupling means your main module is depending on the network module, and when you make any changes or refactoring over there, the same thing will impact the main module. Now the next thing is build time overhead. If you increase the version or if you make any changes to that dependency, and whenever you are running your project, the compile time will increase because API configuration is your available at the runtime and at the compile time. So your project will take more time to prepare the build. Now the next thing is abstraction leakage, because we are exposing our dependency. So there are chances of exposing the classes and the methods to the other module, and they can modify the classes or modify the instances, and it can impact your application behavior. Now the reducing flexibility will get reduced. Why? Because as your that dependency is connected with the other modules, you have to be very careful whenever you're making any changes like refactoring or optimizing the code. Now, how you will choose between implementation and API? It is very simple and straightforward. Whenever you're working on an internal module or when you're making a simple project, And if you're using it for your own purpose and all, then you have to go with the implementation. And if you have a requirement where you're working on a multi-module application or library where you have to expose that library to the other project, other module, then you have to use the API. Until unless it is not required, you don't have to expose that library at all. And as most of us are working in Android development, then it is very easy. Like initially you can go with the implementation, and coming forward whenever your project will grow, and if your project requires that you have to expose your dependency, then you can switch from implementation to the API. And again, I'm saying like you should be very careful whenever you're using API, because you have to review your code and review your changes. Why? Because it can impact your other modules as well, and it is very difficult to track that and to debug that, which is very effort taking and time taken task. Yeah, so that is it. I hope this will give you a better clarity about implementation and API, which one to use, when to use in Android application development. Thank you for watching this video. Please do like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next.